inherently unsafe and distrustful emotionally for children.
Another teen inmate dies, another round of scrutiny into juvenile jail and the adults in charge.
And I'm not going to sit back and have people call me things I'm not.
No more Mr. Nice Guy. Jeb Bush launches an all-out offensive against his chief rival of the moment, Donald Trump.
Don't eat here. They hate cops.
The beef and the blowback. A South Florida Arby's serves up a PR crisis involving a police officer customer. It's just one of the topics we take to the round table. Good morning and welcome. Michael has the day off. Great to have you here on this long Labor Day weekend. And we begin today with the death of another young person in juvenile lockup. At least 2 investigations are underway into what happened this week and whether someone failed to protect. 17-year-old inmate Elord Revolte died at Jackson's Holtz Children's Hospital on Monday following a brawl at Miami's juvenile detention center the day before. This week, the public defender's office went to court arguing to move other young inmates from a facility that detectives now consider a homicide scene. Here with us today, Carlos Martinez, Miami-Dade's chief public defender, who oversees some 200 attorneys handling roughly 10,000 cases at any given time, including a steady number of juveniles in state custody. And we thank you so much for joining us this morning to talk about this as much as you know and where we are. And first, can you just detail for us the status of all of those other inmates involved in what's being described as a melee last Sunday?
Sure. Thank you for having me. The other inmates, we have tried to get a lot of them released. And what we did, we went into court on Friday and we presented, the evidence essentially that all these kids are now suspects as well as witnesses, as well as the officers themselves. So some of them got released. Some of them did not want to get released because if they would have been released, the prosecutor would have charged them directly, would have direct filed them.
Which means they're charged as an adult.
They're charged as an adult on the underlying charges that they had, not part of the investigation.
So there are some of the inmates there, the young inmates, who were there last Sunday who might have been involved in this brawl, still there.
Yes, there are approximately 15 that are still there.
And can you talk about, first of all, how does that even happen? How do 15 or 20 is the number I've heard. How do 15 or 20 young inmates in a state facility get into a brawl without, where are the guards? Where is the staff? How does that even happen?
Those are the questions that we have ourselves, particularly since Omar Paisley died in 2003. One of the issues that we had at the time was lack of staffing and lack of appropriate supervision of the juveniles and a lot of issues around medical services. So this time around, our question is, how many guards were present when the brawl started? How long did the brawl take? And how do you get into a situation where you have so many? And it sounds like if you read the news releases and if you read the report that was filed, the only incident report that's been filed, it's pretty clear from that they all jumped on this one kid.
On Elord Revolte?
Yes, correct.
So he was the target.
It looks like that from the news releases that we've seen.
So it's interesting, and I want to talk about Omar Paisley and his case a little more in a bit, but the news releases that you talk about, we get news releases too, and I want to make very clear that we invited the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Justice or someone to represent her, declined to come on the show, so everything that we've heard and everything that we've seen has been crafted statements that they mail out, answering by email, and I want to put up on the screen what one of those crafted statements said from Christina Daly, who is the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Justice in Florida. And she wrote, "It's absolutely heartbreaking to learn of the death of this young man. In addition to the investigation being conducted by Miami-Dade police, the department has initiated our own investigation to ensure that our very high standards of accountability and transparency are met and all proper procedures were followed." She said, "We'll take all appropriate action to ensure we prevent any tragedy like this from ever occurring again." So, you know, it's very nice and very respectful, and I'm going to guess it's very heartfelt, but it brings up a lot of questions. the high standards that they're going to meet are going to be investigated by this very department. Is that not like the fox checking into the henhouse?
Well, they're supposed to have an inspector general, and one of the things that the grand jury found on the Omar Paisley case is that it was important that if there is an inspector general involved, that the inspector general not be the one that reports just to the Department of Juvenile Justice. So it is important, and it's good that the Metro-Dade, Miami-Dade Police Department is investigating this thing. But let me point something out from that news release, which we found really fascinating. In the news release, it says that the kids were offered counseling as a result of this death. We know for sure from our conversations with each one of the kids that they had no idea that the kid had died in custody. So what counseling are you offering, and what context are you giving the kids?
And doesn't that bring up a possibility that these inmates, young inmates, were questioned about what happened without realizing that there was a death involved? Almost like a death investigation interview without your office, right? Without an attorney? Is that a possibility?
We know for sure that that happened. We know when we found out that there had been a death at the detention center, it initially sounded like it was a medical issue, that the kid did not receive medical attention and he ended up dying. It was much later in the day when we found out that there was an ongoing homicide investigation and that the kids have been questioned. So there are a lot of issues around that. It is completely legal for the police department to do that. The question that arises is, all these kids are represented. We're the attorneys on all these cases. And all of a sudden, there's a serious problem that's been created because we have our clients right now who were either witnesses or participated in this event. So it creates a possible conflict of interest if anyone is charged with this.
Sure. You know, it strikes me, I want to backtrack a little bit for anyone who has not maybe followed the news of what happened. Elord Revolte was involved in this brawl, this melee in Module 9.
Module 9.
Module 9. And that was on a Sunday evening. And then he was taken to Jackson Holtz Children's Hospital on Monday. At what point Monday was he taken to the hospital?
It looks like from the press statements, because again, we haven't gotten anything other than that, that it was about 24 hours later.
So 24 hours later, he's taken to the hospital, and that's where he dies.
Correct.
In the hospital. Is it possible that the detention facility actually did everything right, and maybe there were issues at Holtz Children's Hospital? Is that a possibility? Do we have an autopsy cause of death yet?
We do not have an autopsy. At this point, we really don't have much to go by other than what's pretty clear, a very serious melee. You do not get 15 to 20 kids to get involved in a melee, and for a kid who's 5'6", 140 pounds, to stay standing. So we think that the kid ended up falling down and that others may have jumped on him. So there's a serious possibility that there was internal injuries or that there was some injury to the head.
What is the protocol after something like that? You know, a lot of these kids have parents. Elord Revolte was in the care of the state. He was a foster child. So would the facility call parents or guardians, in this case the Department of Children and Families? Were those calls ever made? Who is notified that this even happened?
One would expect that those calls were made, but in this case we have no indication that Department of Children and Families was ever contacted. And one of the concerns that we have is if there were so many kids involved in the melee, was someone else injured? And we don't know if anybody else was injured, and we don't know if the parents have been contacted whatsoever on all the other kids, not just about the homicide investigation, but also about the physical fight that happened on Sunday.
Sure. All right, the case of Omar Paisley, which is now 12 years ago, 2003, resulted in a grand jury report outlining a lot of systemic changes that were supposed to be in place here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about that case and the changes and whether those have been made. Stay with us. We are back. back with Miami-Dade's public defender Carlos Martinez talking about Elord Revolte, the young man who died this week after a fight in the juvenile detention center. Omar Paisley is a name that many people know in South Florida. He was 17 years old in 2003 when, and we're looking at a photograph of him right now. He was in the juvenile lockup, same place. He eventually died of acute appendicitis after complaining for 3 days in detention. He exhibited horrible pain and symptoms, and his case resulted in wholesale changes at the top of Department of Juvenile Justice, and this grand jury report that came out in January of 2004. It was interesting. I was reading the grand jury report from the state attorney's office, the changes that were made, and some just jumped out at me. We spoke a little while ago about, and one of them, first of all, there's supposed to be an 8-to-1 ratio, inmates to staff during the day. That was the recommendation during the day when the kids are awake. And so it sort of defies logic how if that's the ratio in Module D, how 15 kids can have a melee. Correct. And if the officers, if the two officers, at least two, because remember, these were minimums. This was not what you should have. This is minimums. Do you know what's there now? We do not know. We've asked for information, but it's all part of the investigation now, so everyone's holding back. Yeah, well, you should know we've asked a lot of these questions to the Department of Juvenile Justice and have not gotten those answers. And another one of the grand jury report recommendations that really jumps out is they revolve around the health care that the inmates are supposed to get and the staff around that. Same-day health care for any requests. What does that mean? What that means is if a kid complains about an illness or something, the kid is supposed to be seen. That's sick call. The kid's supposed to be seen the same day. By whom? By medical staff. That is supposed to be 24/7 present. In the facility. In the facility. And there are several other recommendations associated with that. One of them is that an actual doctor, an MD, has to see the kid and review all the materials that whatever other medical staff saw. They have to see it immediately the day after. The other aspect of this, which was kind of interesting, and we don't know what the facts are, but when a kid gets into a situation, a medical situation, the kid is supposed to get a full physical medical examination, and it's supposed to take vitals and also other things that they're supposed to do with the kid just to make sure that things are fine. And do you know whether or not that was done in Revolte's case? The only thing we know is from the news release that it said that on Sunday the kid was actually seen by contracted medical staff, whatever that means. Well, what does that mean? Do you know? Is that in the staff that's within the facility or somewhere else? We do not know. And this was, at the time of Omar Paisley, it was contracted services as well, 24/7. But the issue was that there was no staff on site and that there were other issues that staff on site refused to see the kid. We have no indication that that's happened here. But one of the critical things in this instance is that there should have been a complete physical done on the Sunday. And the other aspect that most of us are really puzzled about is we know the serious situation that's happened from kids playing football and having concussions. Sure. And not just kids, we know it with adults. And we know that the high schools are taking a lot of precautions so that there's medical staff, so there's a concussion, they see the kid right away. In this instance, I mentioned to you earlier that it seems to me that if you have 15 to 20 involved, a 5'6" kid, 140 pounds, is not gonna remain standing for very long. So if this kid ended up on the floor and he may have gotten hit on the head, why was he not taken into the hospital for an examination to make sure that there's no concussion? It's a good question. The spokesperson for the Department of Juvenile Justice at one point this week emailed, I want to quote her, if a youth needs outside medical attention, what we talked about, if a youth needs outside medical attention, he or she gets it without hesitation. Did that happen here? Do you know? Not from what we've heard. What we've heard is there was a 24-hour hesitation, 18 to 24-hour hesitation getting the kid seen, and it looks like they waited until the kid was actually vomiting
before he got transported to the hospital.
You know, shades of the Omar Paisley case, there were 2 nurses who were arrested on criminal charges. Ultimately, what happened was charges were dropped for one of the nurses, they were homicide charges. And in the other case, the other nurse eventually pleaded guilty to culpable negligence. So criminally speaking, there were not tough sanctions in the Omar Paisley case. And a lot of the commentary afterwards was horror at how human beings reacted. Forget protocol and steps, but the human beings and the callousness exhibited.
Right.
Do you find anything in this case that mirrors that?
We have not seen anything yet. And there have been major improvements for the Department of Juvenile Justice and our detention centers since Omar Paisley. We're nowhere close to the situation that we had when Omar Paisley was in custody. There were 300 kids in custody. In this one, our number is 80, but that's not counting private attorney kids. So it could be up to 100, but not many more than that. So you have fewer. But there's an interesting issue that's happening, however, which I think it is possible that they did not have enough staff at the time. So it would be very difficult to all of a sudden charge an officer with neglect of duty when in fact if you don't have enough staff around, how is it possible that that officer can do their job and stop the fight?
And whose consequence would that be? That would be the actual department's consequence for not keeping the appropriate staff?
That could be in a civil suit or of some kind.
But that's what my next question was, nobody is going to be investigating that but the department.
Correct. Right now it's but the department and Miami-Dade Police Department. As part of their homicide investigation, I'm sure they're taking a look at what other things were going on at the time.
Carlos Martinez, I so appreciate that you came in. I know it's frustrating that there are so many questions we can't answer without forthcoming these investigations. But we will watch that and invite you to keep in touch with us about that. It's great to see you. Thanks
Thank
again.
you for the opportunity.
Okay. All right. When we come back from the launch of Jeb Bush's Trump offensive to the lunch, actually dinner, that became Arby's PR nightmare. We're taking that all to the round table plus, and that's next. We have a lot to cover on the round table today and a heartfelt welcome back as well. So let's get right to introductions. Katie Fang is a round table regular, former prosecutor, now in private practice. Tangela Sears is back, a community connector, activist, and political consultant. Henry Crespo is president of the Democratic Black Caucus of Florida and a radio host. Marilee Cancio is a corporate and real estate attorney, president of the Women's Republican Club of Miami, and is currently on the Governor Scott's Commission on Healthcare and Hospital Funding. Welcome, everybody. A house full today.
Thank you for having us.
Good for being here. And first, a warm and loving welcome back to you. And I want to just be sure that everybody is sort of aware of what you've been going through, the most difficult time. Tangela lost her son in May. He was murdered. And this is your first public appearance.
Yes.
We are grateful you're back, and especially having such a profound loss in your life. What everyone is so fascinated by, your strength and poise, and how much of an advocate you have been for people in your shoes right now, in your career, and now you find yourself living that hell personally, and it has been a way for you to create a legacy, and I want you to be able to talk about that a little bit.
Okay. First, I want to start out, since it is my first public appearance, I want to start out by saying that I have received so much love, respect, and prayers, support from the state of Florida, especially Miami-Dade County. And I want to say thanks, special thanks to our state attorney and my pastor, Bishop Curry, and my Milberg family and all elected officials, pastors, our school board superintendent, our school board attorney, Attorney Van Gates, WPLJ 10, Congresswoman, her family, and Commissioner Hardeman and his family, and all of David's friends. I just want to say thanks for the love and the support.
And some of those friends are sitting right at this table here.
Yes.
I know. I'm particularly interested in this week. There have been young people who have been shot in our community again. And I know, Tangela, that's something that you now watch. What is it that you are planning to do now? What has this done for you?
Well, it's made me question whether or not Black Lives Matter, because my son was actually killed by a black male. And so many times, I can speak for so many mothers: Annette Jackson, Hermana Richardson, Jackie Hall, Vicki Hemingway, Sharon Latson, so many mothers, I can go on, that have lost their kids to black on black crime, but there's a silence. I look at Miami Gardens, where from 2013 to 2015, they had 96% of their homicides were black on black. There was one police involved shooting, and that one police involved shooting, it caused people to go in and disrupt council meeting, but on the black on black crime, it's silent. So the mothers, I think all they want, at one time I say they, now I can say we, all we want is justice.
That's something we talk about here.
We want people in jail that's killing our sons. I think opposed to the the president focusing on so much with other countries, you need to look at some of the legislation within the federal government that have not been changed in over 25 years, that some of these mothers, not just the person that killed my son is in jail, but you know there's a large percentage of kids that's not in jail for killing. So some of those laws have to be tweeted in order for some things to happen and people to be jailed, because there's too many things that the federal government say they can't do at this point. And the U.S. Attorney, I know he would like to do some things, but his arms are tied because of the laws.
Henry.
Well, you know, I agree with Tange, but all of politics is local, right? So when you have our local commissioners, all local mayors, local police departments, they should really come up with a, with a full plan of action, supported by community also, that deals with some of this culture. We have a culture in the black community. Look, we know this. White folks, 80% of white folks kill white folks, 80% of black folks kill black folks, and everything else in the middle. We do know that. But the fact is that you have so much poverty, drug selling, and a lot of other factors in our communities because of the institutional poverty that's been caught up. This culture of just killing one another is just mind-boggling, and I think that there needs to be more pressure on communities and this element that manifests with this culture manifests.
I have to disagree with you. I have to disagree with you. My son, he was not involved with any gangs. He was not involved with any drugs. We have a lot of innocent black people that's killed, and no matter how much community involvement we have, until laws are changed, because it gets stuck in the state attorney's office. It gets stuck because no witnesses are coming forward.
Right.
The RICO Act will help that if they tweak some laws.
Well, I'm not saying that your son was involved in anything. Your son was a stellar young man. He was working, and he was caught up in the situation. Might have been at the wrong place at the wrong time, just like that young man.
At his house?
What you're talking about is a more holistic look at a community.
Right.
What do you think about the RICO Act? That's interesting.
The racketeering, what Tangela's talking about is RICO's, the Racketeering Act. It'd be great and does have a breadth of application that could be potentially powerful. I think what Henry's talking about, though, is there's a certain numbness that we have to the culture of violence that Henry's talking about, whether they're innocent victims or not. And that numbness results when you hear, oh, another black male was killed maybe in Overtown or something by another black male, and we just kind of are casual about it, right? We're kind of dismissive. So Tangela speaks about, and Henry speaks about maybe having some proactivity on the local level in more of a grassroots way to get laws changed, to have community a little bit more aware about what's happening, because you're right, unless you break the cycle of poverty, unless you break the cycle of violence, how are you ever really going to find it? Now, Tangela's son is in a unique situation in that he was not perpetuating the stereotype of
Correct.
the young black male committing a crime and getting killed while committing a crime. That's certainly not what happened to her son. And so how do the laws help somebody like Tangela? How do the laws get changed so they can benefit her? Because she's right, it gets stuck and backlogged in the state attorney's office. We have too many cases. The prosecutors are overtasked. They need more help, but they need more teeth. If the laws don't have more teeth, you're not going to have results, and that's a problem.
There's a culture of somebody that goes to somebody's home. What happened to Tangela's son is heartfelt, right? He was in his home. And when you talk about some issues in Miami Gardens, I can give you countless stories of people in their home, innocently, doing, you know, a grandmother doing somebody's hair, somebody sprays outside.
Exactly.
So I'm sorry not to get all into the details because I know, but there's no reason why somebody can target somebody in somebody's home, irregardless of it. And the culture of folks in some communities is just like on a trailer park. They'll just come and there's no regard to life. That's the point that I'm trying to say,
well,
as it relates to that.
For Tangela's situation, and if you don't mind me saying this, Tangela, sure. The murderer in Tangela's son's case is claiming to stand your ground. Yeah. Since 2005, I have been I've been so infuriated by that law because of its misapplication and because of the way that it's just become a train wreck in our judicial system. To allow a man to kill somebody in cold blood like Tangela's son, right, and then to claim stand your ground, he's in jail, he hasn't bonded out, but he's going to be able to sit there and challenge what otherwise should not be challenged. It should be left to a jury to decide. It's laws like that that need to be gone, that need to be changed.
All right, well, let's hold it right there for a second. When we come back, we're going to turn to some politics. I know Mary Lee's going to like that. A lot to talk about this week, including Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz made a big decision this morning. We're going to have that for you when we come back.
And in weighing everything, all the information that I've had in front of me, I concluded that the best thing to do is to vote in support of the Iran deal.
That was Congresswoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz just a couple of hours ago, making a decision that everybody was pretty closely watching. The chair of the DNC, yet a congresswoman of a heavily pro-Israel Jewish constituency. What was she going to do? She's supporting this deal, the Iranian nuclear deal. Was that a surprise to you?
No surprise whatsoever. She had to tout the party line on this one, even though it goes against what her constituents want. And she waited until after the votes were counted, and clearly that was going to pass, so she had to support the president's initiative.
This week, the 34th senator threw her support.
Yeah, and that makes it surprised that she did this, though, because she waited till the votes were in, and it was clear that it was going to pass even without, you know, any further opposition. Why not say, I've always loved Barack Obama, I support the DNC, but my constituency is behind me, and as I love Israel, I cannot do this. There's no harm, no foul, right? I mean, unless she doesn't want to make Barack Obama upset.
Would she have had to resign from her position with the DNC?
She's entitled to her opinion,
well,
is she
look,
not?
The Republican Party doesn't follow the, you know, the thoughts of their constituency. I mean, you see a lot of
however you define that these days, by the way.
You look at some of their policy, it could be seen as anti-women, anti-poor, and I'm pretty sure they have women, they have folks that are living in poverty, working class.
We have a Republican woman in our midst.
But look, the issue is, what's the alternative? Because ultimately, everyone that's talking against this plan has no alternative. So, you know.
I think the alternative is just to do nothing and just to keep sanctions in place, because we're getting nothing out of this deal. We cannot even go and verify what they're doing, and they are going to get a nuclear weapon, and it's going to be horrible for the Middle East.
I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, do you think, you know, Vice President Joe Biden came this week to sort of
talks about it,
sell her constituents on it? Do you think that was a preemptive paving of the way?
I saw him on Wednesday. He was at Miami-Dade College speaking about education, And afterwards, he went and did his rounds, raised some money, went and spoke with some folks, and what we're seeing is that he's testing the waters for a potential presidential campaign.
Well, you know, in Atlanta, he was in Atlanta following the trip here, and I think Joe Biden, for the first time, acknowledged that he's thinking about that, and I thought it was a pretty raw, authentic, I don't know if you saw it. He said, I honestly don't know.
Can he do it? Can he do it? It's very difficult. He just lost his child, and he's grieving, and
let's take a listen to what he said in case someone hasn't heard it yet.
I will be straightforward with you. The most relevant factor in my decision is whether my family and I have the emotional energy to run. Some might think that is not appropriate. But unless I can go to my party and the American people and say that I am able to devote my whole heart and my whole soul to this endeavor, it would not be appropriate.
You got to give him points for authenticity.
Well, look, the emotional space that he's in, we do know the death of his son, but we do know that Bo wanted him to jump in the race. His wife probably wants him to. So he has to look at that family thing. And then the political space is where's the lane? You know, how does he get to the presidency, to the nomination at the end of the day? We know that everybody's waiting. The liberals are with Bernie Sanders, the African American, and everybody's in between is kind of waiting on Hillary to some extent because we're not in the discussion for the most part. So where's the space for him? That's the political question. I think he's figuring that out.
I think that he's just watching Hillary just plummet, and what we're seeing in New Hampshire and Iowa, that we see Bernie Sanders leading by 9 points. We see the trend that Sanders is going up. Even Biden is has 16% of the vote, and he's not even in the race. So we're just seeing her destroy her own campaign. He doesn't want to be seen as the one that comes in here to create trouble. She has created this trouble all by herself, and that's what we're seeing. Is she doesn't have good answers. We've seen more of her this past week to sort of bring some other talking points out.
She's become more pro, well, she not become more pro-women, but she definitely took some time to talk about it.
Her numbers are dropping tremendously. I wouldn't support Hillary, but I would support Joe Biden if he ran. But the grieving piece, that can be very, very difficult to have to run across America and still grieving.
Sure.
There may come a time where he break down. I've done it.
Of course.
I think it would be motivational too, because if his son wanted him to run, and I mean, I saw him on Wednesday surrounded by young students at Miami-Dade College, and he was very energized, and he is great with the folks, and we see that his favorable ratings are at the highest level they've ever been, and we've seen Hillary's numbers been at the lowest level since 2001 after that pardon scandal when they left office.
So the party will probably want him to try to save.
Let's jump to the Republican side. We have Jeb Bush, no more Mr. Nice Guy this week. The YouTube video painting Donald Trump as liberal, liberal, liberal in his own words. Let's look at a little clip of that.
This guy is not a conservative. And this guy does not believe in the greatness of our country, or if he did, he would start explaining how he would propose things that would make it possible for us to rise up again. I'm going to push back when he says things that are ugly, that I think will damage our brand, damage our ability to be successful. And I'm sure as hell going to, when he attacks me personally or disparages my family, damn right I'm going to fight back.
What happened to the joyful tortoise?
Well, now it's the snapping turtle. and you know what? I think that he's doing exactly right. They said he was low energy. It's about time to Jeb get on this race.
No more vanilla Jeb.
Catch the train, or it's going to.
There was that missing exclamation point. And the exclamation point is back to Jeb, apparently.
And you know, Donald Trump this week took his pledge. he will pledge his oath to the GOP?
You know,
For as long as that lasts.
and that doesn't matter. It's not a legal contract that he can just say, I was not treated fairly, goodbye. And that's
Donald
what he'll
Trump
do.
do that? Would he do that?
Absolutely.
He would totally do that, absolutely.
I can just see that happening.
I didn't realize Trump was such a germaphobe, though. That was a very compelling part of that video that Jeb did about how Trump won't shake anybody's hands because he's such a germaphobe, apparently.
And he reminds you, he
What does he
has
do,
his
fist bump?
own.
No, he's shaking hands now.
But you know,
He makes his own decisions.
I gotta say this story if we have time. I was at a party yesterday, and a lady at the party said that she ordered a Trump hat, a Trump campaign hat, Make America Great, and she said she was going to wear it all weekend. And I said, are you serious? Would you really vote for that guy? And she said, no. When it comes down to it, I'm not going to vote for him. But right now, I'm going to support him.
Strong. He's at 44%.
Exactly.
She's in good company.
He's saying what people want.
He's speaking to a constituency. The problem with Jeb is going to be if he out-conservatives or he out-conservative.
Is that a word?
Conservatizes, maybe?
Conservatizes, thank you.
Sure.
Just
Trump,
add the IZE.
yes, excuse me, folks out there. The question is, can he then go to the middle and win?
We'll see. So before we go, a very happy birthday to Mari Lee Cancio. It's a big one.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank you.
birthday tomorrow.
Birthday.
Yeah, that's
Half a
great.
century.
It gets better.
Thank
Another
you.
year more fabulous.
Birthday.
Thank you all. Awesome. Great to see you here.
Thanks.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Glenn.
And thank you. All right, elective office has its perks and its downsides, like accepting graduation gifts for your kids from questionable sources when Local 10 investigator Bob Norman is watching. And his report is next. By law, public servants and officials must keep a solid separation between the personal and the public. And that's why Local 10 investigator Bob Norman had questions about a graduation party and gifts given for Broward Sheriff Scott Israel's children.
Are you Jamie?
That's me.
Hey. This is millionaire businessman Jamie McDonnell arriving at a political fundraiser for Broward Sheriff Scott Israel last year.
What fundraiser? I'm coming to meet my friend Ron Bergeron. I don't know what you're talking about.
Now McDonnell's name has popped up again, this time on Sheriff Israel's gift disclosure forms filed with the State Ethics Commission for providing the sheriff $843 for catering another lavish event, complete with large checks and cash gifts and this mountain of pricey king crab. A party attended by major campaign donors, Sheriff's Advisory Council members, and several high-ranking BSO deputies and union officials. Only this was no political fundraiser. It was a graduation party for Israel's 3 kids. Former BSO commander Sam Frasterio.
Why would you accept money for your personal gain from people you promoted and hired?
The checks, the cash, and other gifts for the kids adds up to more than $13,000. Throw in the use of the house and the king crab, the value of this party was more than $15,000.
Things like the good old boy syndrome are over forever, and we will promote and transfer by merit and merit alone.
The $1 million house was provided by a deputy named Ira Goldberg, shown here at the party, who campaigned for Israel and was leapfrog promoted from detention deputy all the way to captain, almost doubling his salary to $118,000 a year. Use of the home was listed as a gift worth $1,000 to the sheriff. Others giving gifts were several high-ranking command staffers like Lieutenant Colonels E. Keith Neely and Robert Drago, Israel's campaign strategist Ron Gunsberger, whom Israel hired as general counsel at BSO after the election at a salary of over $200,000, gave the kids $300.
He is using his political position for personal gain. There's no question about it.
Frasterio, who admittedly is no fan of Israel after the two men had a falling out several years ago, said the best proof that Israel's cashing in on the sheriff's job was the presence of McDonnell and Davie Garbage Company owner Ron Bergeron, whose gift was worth over $600. But both Bergeron and McDonnell actually opposed Israel's election, strongly backing then-Sheriff Al Lamberti in 2012.
That tells me they go to whatever side wins for their political gains.
A look at the list shows that at least 10 gifts came from those who opposed Israel's election, accounting for $4,500 in gifts, including Craig Goldstein, whose Westway Towing has a BSO contract. The problem, Goldstein's gift was $300, in violation of Florida ethics law prohibiting government vendors from giving any gift in excess of $100.
Thanks.
You're not going to address that? Sheriff Israels refused to speak with me since I did a story about a yacht trip he took with a campaign donor more than 2 years ago. But Gunsberger emailed, the sheriff will immediately file an amended state gift report and personally refund Goldstein the $200 difference. It was an honest oversight by the sheriff.
Bob Norman also heard from the tow company owner who denied his gift was meant to influence the sheriff. He was unable to get a response from the others involved mentioned in this report. And next, just how did an offhand comment become a national slap in the face to police officers everywhere? Stay tuned. A live, beautiful look for you right now from our Key West cam. And here is Weather Authority meteorologist Jennifer Correa with the Sunday forecast for everyone else.
Good afternoon, Glenna, and good afternoon, South Florida. Beautiful live shot there out of Key West. So mostly sunny skies have taken over, at least for much of the Keys. And then across Broward and Miami-Dade, we are seeing more clouds building in. And by the way, temperatures are already in those upper 80s. Inland temperatures, especially for areas of southwest Miami-Dade, are beating the other areas, already hitting 92 degrees in Kendall, 90 degrees in Homestead, and this is what it feels like in Homestead, 102. So triple digits. Once again, that's what it'll feel like, and we will see the threat for some storms later this afternoon. Now, the winds are starting to change. We're seeing a flow more out of the south, down in the Keys, out of the east for Broward and Miami-Dade, and a few showers have developed over the upper Keys, but really that's about it so far. So this lunch hour, you won't need those umbrellas, but have them in hand because by 2 o'clock we'll see the showers and storms begin to bubble up. The coverage isn't as widespread as it was yesterday, but there could still be some strong storms. Lightning will be the major threat, and gusty winds cannot be ruled out, of course, with some heavy rainfall that may cause some street flooding. For tomorrow, Labor Day Monday, we're waking up once again to warm and humid conditions, maybe a coastal shower or two. Otherwise, it'll be dry in the morning and then the chance with a few storms during the afternoon, but I think it'll be a beautiful day either way, and rain chances go down middle of the week. Glenna?
Sounds good, Jennifer. Thanks. Until this week, Arby's was probably best known for roast beef, and now it's best known for a beef with police, or at least that's how an employee's offhand comment blew up into a national slap in the face for everyone who wears a badge or in uniform. Pembroke Pines Police Sergeant Jennifer Martin filed a report about her drive-through experience. She wrote, quote, for informational purposes of the report, an employee at the drive-through window walked away during her transaction and was replaced by a manager who said his guy didn't want to serve a cop. Why he said that, how he said it, he insisted it was a joke. That's something we probably will never know. The blowback from police officers and families, the unions, the supporters, that was instant and furious. Included pickets and calls for a nationwide boycott of Arby's. The PR crisis had Arby's top brass travel to Pembroke Pines, delivering apologies and free food. But the bigger takeaway here may be for those unfamiliar with the always on guard aspect of the world the law enforcement officers know. That is their world. Miami-Dade police officer Lydia Marquez actually said it better and more publicly than anyone this week in a courageous and personal video posted on her Facebook page. It is hard to imagine life on the front lines of potential danger 24/7. Dangers known and unknown. Consider all the incidents of officers targeted just in the last weeks, officers murdered in Illinois and in Texas. And that might explain the Pembroke Pines sergeant's strong reaction to whatever the Arby's manager said. That manager was fired, his employees suspended for what was likely nothing more than bad judgment, but what a good opportunity Arby's served up to consider what it's like to live in someone else's uniform. So what do you think? We invite you to weigh in on any topic you like on email, Facebook, Twitter, at any of these addresses. We're so easy to find. Have a beautiful Sunday and Labor Day weekend as well.